Hello, this is Arielle from Inconspicuous Bear, and I'll be narrating the heroic version of the Mannoroth encounter in Hellfire Citadel from a Guardian point of view. Mannoroth is a four-phase encounter that features really kind of relatively simple tank mechanics that are built on timing rather than execution, I guess, if that makes any sense. There's really only a couple things you have to worry about for the entire fight, and they're not really that big of a deal. However, if you fail on them, you'll probably likely die when during progression, so it is something you have to keep in mind. Phase 1 starts with the raid essentially engaging what amounts to trash for the Mannoroth encounter. There's three dudes on the top of the Citadel, they're doing stuff, you gotta kill them, blah blah blah. The only part of this that you actually care about as a tank is one of them will put a curse on someone that when it expires will summon a Doomguard. The Doomguard has to be tanked. Doomguard will stack a debuff on you called Doomspike, and then when it expires, it'll do damage to you. Kinda like the debuff from Garrosh back in Siege of Orgrimmar. So just to kind of swap whatever you feel like you want to swap. Phase one's pretty meaningless for tanks. So just basically swap for some amount of Doom Spikes. You'll only ever get one of these Doom Guards unless your DPS is like unbelievably horrible or you're doing it in a really strange order. So again, it doesn't last very long and it's like barely dangerous at all. Phase 2 starts once all of the summoners are dead, and this will cause Mannoroth himself to rise from his deathly grave, I guess, if you want to call it that. Comes out of this big pool of goo in the middle and reforms, and you have to tank him. For positioning, you want depends on your strat, but the general strat is keep his butt about 10 or 15 yards away from one of the pillars. It's on the last pillar you'd kill in a normal order. So usually you go right to left. So on the left pillar, you want to keep him, basically tank him on the start of the inside circle. You can see that ring of metal, that first ring of metal there on the inside circle. You kind of want to have him positioned on top of that. This gives your rest of your raid plenty of room in the back and gives you uh, keeps you within range of everybody because his hitbox is really huge. The first mechanic you have to worry about is actually something the entire raid has to worry about. However, since it is just extra damage you can avoid, you might as well avoid it. He'll cast Fell Hellstorm for basically the rest of the fight, and it'll cause these little black circles to form under people's feet. And if you stay there, when things fall from the sky, you take fire damage. That's basically it. So just try to avoid them if you can. He doesn't Mannoroth is really slow to move, so he's not going to like twitch on you if you sidestep in and out of them. So don't be afraid to do that. And it's extra damage that you can avoid taking. So why would you take the damage? The next two abilities are what comprises his glaive combo. So basically, he'll do something called glaive thrust, followed by a massive blast, followed by a second glaive thrust. Now, the glaive thrust by itself is kind of trivial. I mean, it doesn't really do any damage. It's not going to kill you. However, if you don't have your active mitigation up for it, i.e. Savage Defense, you will get a bleeding debuff on you for like 90k a second, which is really bad, especially after you've taken the glaive thrust and the massive blast and been knocked back. So just make sure you save Savage Defense charge for when glaive thrust is going to happen. I mean, it's not like he does really that much damage to begin with, so just making sure you have a charge available for glaive thrust is definitely the best option out of anything. And try and also save a DLC proc for this glaive thrust as well. That way, after the massive blast happens, you can immediately hit it and then be back at full health, and you'll be fine. Glaive combo also serves as the swap mechanic for Mannoroth. Basically, after every massive blast, the taunt swap will occur, so it'll go glaive thrust, massive blast, swap, and then the second tank will take the next glaive thrust. This will continue for the rest of the fight. There's no reason you should ever take two glaive combos in a row. You can, I guess, but it's not recommended because the massive blast leaves a debuff on you, which increases the damage of subsequent massive blasts. On progression, this can be really problematic. On farm, it's meaningless. I mean, I've taken up to 4 of them before, so it's not completely horrible, but still, I mean, there's no reason to do it, so why bother putting your healers through that? Nothing changes in Phase 3, however, in Phase 4, all of his abilities become empowered, of which the only two that you actually care about are the glaive combo and something called Shadow Force. Now, he actually gained Shadow Force in Phase 3, but it doesn't target tanks in Phase 3, so he didn't care. However, in Phase 4, it targets everybody, and basically it's just an attempt to push you off the platform on top of this tower. All you need to do is just keep running. Generally, you'll have a roar up for this, so with a roar, you can, as long as you are rotating him around the circle and facing the or you're facing the opposite edge of the platform when he starts. You'll never actually get pushed off with a roar as long as you keep running forward. So just do that and you'll be fine. As for the Massive Blast, the only difference here is that when Massive Blast is cast, you'll see some waves. He'll actually send out 3 waves as well. But however, you're a druid, so you don't really care. You'll just wild charge over every time and never get hit by them. So that mechanic you just completely trivialize. As for the Glaive Thrust, the only new thing there is you have to make 100% certain you're never pointing it at your raid, because it's actually now a completely frontal line effect. So anyone caught in it will take the damage. So if your raid's in it, they'll die. So you just want to make sure that for positioning, you have Mannoroth pointed towards the opposite end of the platform. The person who's going to be swapping after the Massive Blast is to your left, and the rest of the raid is wherever the rest of the raid is going to be. But the new tank and the raid cannot be in the same spot. For talents, everything is actually exactly the same as usual, except you want Wild Charge instead of Feline Swiftness, purely for the Massive Blasts. Basically, once you get Massive Blast, you just start spamming Wild Charge until you charge back to the boss. Boom, problem solved. It saves a lot of headaches, so you might as well have it. I mean, you could do the same thing with Displacer Beast, in theory. I have actually done it before when I failed to respec after certain fights. Feline Swiftness there's really no reason to have Feline Swiftness in this fight, because the only thing it's good for is Shadow Force, and you have roars for that, so should never be a big deal. Just take Wild Charge. You'll thank yourself later. The rest of the talents are normal: Iron Ward, Soul of the Forest, Dream of Stars, and Pulverize. I mentioned before that you want to try and hold DLC procs for after Massive Blast to full heal yourself. Other than that, nothing really too specific you can do. There's no optimal time to use Zerk, because the only multi-target situations happen with Imps and Infernals, and they're never either alive long enough to benefit from Zerk, or they are never close enough to the boss to benefit from Zerk. So you just kind of use it for single target stuff whenever you feel like it, pretty much. Yeah, I mean, that's really the only thing about this fight. It's not really that hard from tank perspective. It's just timing and then making sure you don't fall off the edge. Hope you enjoyed this video. Good luck in Hellfire Citadel.